Okay, we'll pick up on Chapter 14. This will be Part 2. And we're looking at Exercise 14.1, number 20. This one is a little hard for someone who's just beginning to code, so I thought it was a good idea for us to work through it little by little so you can see how we might code it. The first thing I've done here is show you the pathways. So the first code, infection, post-procedural, because this is due to acute post-operative peritonitis. So the subterm we're looking for is post-procedural, and that'll take us to 281.4, and that will be the principal diagnosis. We'll have to look at how we get these extra characters, and we'll look at that during this podcast. The next code is shock, post-procedural, post-operative, septic shock. That's referring back to these terms right here. And that's a T81.12. And always the dash means we need more characters, so we will be looking at that. And per the guidelines, a code for shock cannot be the principal. So we know right away that this code describing the shock is not the principal. Then we look at enterococcal sepsis, A41.81, and last of all, our acute peritonitis, K65.0. So we're going to look at those one at a time. The first one we'll look at is our infection post-procedural. Let's find that in the code book. Okay, so in the alphabetic index, here we go with infection, and we're looking for post-procedural. Slide down. And here is post-procedural. And you notice if the doctor had used the term post-operative, it's the same code. So now we're going to go to T81.4. We know that that little icon means we need more characters to make this a complete code. And when we look it up in the tabular, T81.4, infection following the procedure, right away I notice seven characters are needed to make this a complete code. Let me move that up. That's a little bit better. T81.4, infection following a procedure. And here's our exact wording from our documentation, sepsis following a procedure. We need use additional code to identify the infection, and then use additional code to identify severe sepsis, if applicable. Our documentation did not use the term severe sepsis. If those terms, those words are not used, you do not code them. Sepsis and severe sepsis, different codes. So we know we're in the right category because we see this is what our documentation said. We know we have to use an additional code to identify an infection, so now we're just going to, there's nothing else below it. So how do we need 7 characters? Well, we have to go back to the very beginning of this chapter where it tells us that we have to identify the 7th character as the encounter, whether it be initial, subsequent, or sequela. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the chapter. And you may or may not know that chapter 19 is S and T codes. So S00 to T88, these categories, are included in chapter 19. And we have very chapter-specific guidelines for the application of the 7th character in chapter 19. And I won't go through them verbatim because these podcasts get so long, but you will see that the 7th character A, initial encounter, is used while the patient is receiving active treatment for the condition. Examples are surgical treatment, ED, and evaluation by the same or a different physician. So this is what tells us we're going to have to apply that 7th character. And then the guidelines go through, here's the initial, here's the subsequent, and later on it goes through the sequela. So please read through all that on your own, but just be aware that in this case we are talking about the initial encounter. So if we're talking about the initial encounter, and we know that we had T81.4, we're going to have placeholders for characters 5 and 6. So T81.4 XXA is a complete code. I go into it a little more explanation here. You can use an uppercase or a lowercase x as long as something is a placeholder for those 5th and 6th characters. And the next code we're going to look at, you see, has one placeholder in the 6th position. So let's look at that one next. This one is shock, post-procedural, post-operative, septic. Okay, so now it's shock. I'm looking for post-procedural. Just going to slide down, and here it is. T81.10 with more characters needed. Let me just look at some of these subterms to see if any of these are something we need to look at. Oh, look, there is. Septic. So by going in another indentation level, we've become more specific. And that takes us to T81.12 with extra characters needed. So let's look that up in our tabular. And now we're T81.1. You see here, we need 5 characters. And we've only got 4, so we know we need that. Shock during or resulting from a procedure. Here's some excludes notes, none of which apply to us. This septic shock, R65, is a severe sepsis. The R codes are severe sepsis. Ours is not that. So we know these don't apply to us in this case. Post-procedural septic shock. Here we go. This is us. Tells us we need 7 characters. Also, code first underlying infection. This instructional note does apply to us. And use additional code to identify any associated organ dysfunction. And our guidelines did not give us that. I'm sorry, our documentation did not give us that. But we know we're on the right track. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are here. So our 6th character is going to have to be the placeholder X, because our 7th character is going to be our encounter, which in this case is initial. So our 7th character is going to be an A. And that explains how we get back to this code right here, T81.12XA. I have this guideline here just to help us in the sequencing of those 2 T81 codes. And this is the guideline I used for cases of septic shock. The code for the systemic infection should be sequenced first, followed by the code for the severe sepsis, or code T81, T81.12, which is your shock. Also in this guideline, it tells us that the code for septic shock cannot be assigned as a principal. And this one is so long, I have to have a second slide, because it also uses this particular guideline for post-procedural infection and post-procedural septic shock. That's hard to say. Because it tells us exactly how we sequence these codes. If a post-procedural infection has resulted in post-procedural septic shock, the code for the precipitating complication, such as code T81.4-, infection following a procedure, should be coded first, followed by code T81.12-, post-procedural septic shock. A code for the systemic infection should also be assigned. And there's your guideline. So this particular case had me looking for guidelines to help me to know how to sequence those 2 things. There was also an instructional note that said code your infection, and there is your infection, your enterococcus infection. We'll go through that in a second. And the K65 is the peritonitis. So we're getting there. We're getting our way through this code. I want to spend a little more time on some other examples. HIV is infection that you're going to always see on all your exams, both on the mock exam in 289, on the national exam in the RHIT, and of course in the coding exams, because it's so important and it has very specific coding guidelines for an individual who has been diagnosed as HIV positive. So here's an example. Someone has come in with candidiasis of the esophagus, opportunistic, secondary to AIDS. When you see that term opportunistic, that tells you that this is directly because of the AIDS. It is a related condition. So our path is to start with our main term human, immunodeficiency virus, infection B20. I'm going to trust that you can find that on your own. And candidiasis or candidal esophagus B3781. And the rationale for that is the patient admitted for an HIV-related condition. And here's where I've quoted that guideline. The next example is a positive HIV test in a patient who is asymptomatic, presenting no related symptoms, and has no history of HIV infection. The only thing he has is a positive test. So the test is your main term, HIV, positive, giving you Z21. And the guideline for that is an asymptomatic HIV. You've got a very specific guideline telling you to use Z21. This is someone who is asymptomatic. There's no documentation of any symptoms. He's just simply, he or she, simply listed as HIV positive. If the documentation had said the patient has AIDS, then you would use B20, not the Z21 code. The Z21 code is reserved for those people who have had the positive HIV test. Here's an example of a patient admitted for an unrelated condition who also has AIDS. The person has the acute appendicitis. This comes under this code, K35.80. The B20 is the AIDS, and then the C46.0 is the sarcoma. And here's your pathway to get to those codes. And your guideline is for patients with HIV disease admitted for an unrelated condition. It tells us exactly how to sequence that. The code for the unrelated condition is your principal. Then your next code, your next diagnosis would be your B20, followed by any additional codes. In this case, the Kaposi sarcoma would be the last code. So that's what I have for Chapter 14. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion board and I will attempt to answer them. When you post a question, I expect you to show me in your question what pathway you were using. That way I can see if there's a specific place that I can tell you to look differently or go in a different direction to find the correct code. Our next podcast will be Chapter 29, which is neoplasm. This corresponds to Chapter 2 in the ICD-10 CM book, Neoplasm. Talk to you then.